The folder hit the front desk with a sound that made the receptionist look up. Callie Sutton didn't mean to slam it. Her hands were just shaking. She took a breath, adjusted the strap of her bag, looked at the woman behind the marble counter, early 50s, pearl earrings, the kind of smile that stopped just short of her eyes, and said, "I have a 2 o'clock, Sutton, for the hotel management position." The receptionist typed something without looking at her. "Human resources is on the 4th floor. Elevators around the corner." "I know, I've been here before," Callie said it quietly. Not defensive, just a fact. She took the elevator up. The Alderton Grand was the kind of hotel that made you feel like you'd done something wrong just by walking in. 42 floors of black glass and imported marble in the middle of downtown Chicago. The lobby had a chandelier that cost more than her apartment building. She knew because she'd read the press release 3 years ago, back when she still thought places like this were meant for people like her. That was before. She straightened her blazer outside the HR office, looked at her reflection in the glass door. 31 years old, and she felt about 12. She pushed the door open. The interview lasted 22 minutes, Callie counted. She always counted things when she was nervous. Steps, seconds, tiles on the floor. 22 minutes, and she knew by minute 7 that it wasn't going the way she'd hoped. The HR director, a thin man named Gerald who kept clicking his pen, asked twice about the gap in her employment history. She explained her mother had been sick, needed full-time care, 18 months, it was over now. He nodded like he was listening and wrote something down that she couldn't read upside down. She shook his hand, thanked him, took the elevator back down. The lobby was busier now. A conference group arriving, rolling suitcases, lanyards, the kind of organized chaos that happened at big hotels at 3 in the afternoon. Callie moved through it, head down, thinking about the 4:47 train, thinking about whether she had anything at home for dinner, thinking about how she was going to tell her daughter that this one probably wasn't going to work out either. She didn't see the man coming out of the side corridor. She felt the impact first, a solid wall of dark soot, and then the momentum, her bag swinging off her shoulder, and the sound, that awful scattered sound of everything on the floor at once. "I'm so sorry." She was already crouching, gathering. Her wallet had come open. Coins rolled, a chapstick, a crumpled CVS receipt, a photograph, face up on the marble floor. She reached for it. Someone else reached for it at the same time. Their hands were inches apart. She looked up. The man crouching across from her was about 40, maybe a few years older. Dark hair, a little gray at the temples. The kind of face that looked like it didn't spend much time being still. He was looking at the photograph, not at her. At the photograph. Something happened to his expression that she didn't have a word for. Not surprise exactly. Something quieter and older than surprise. "I'm sorry," she said again, reaching past him to take the photo. She tucked it into her wallet, stood up. He stood up too. He was tall. The suit was not just expensive, it was the kind of expensive that didn't announce itself, which was somehow worse. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Fine. I wasn't watching where I was going, neither was I." He looked at her wallet. She was still clutching it, then at her face. "Are you a guest?" "No." She didn't elaborate. "I was here for an interview." Something shifted behind his eyes. He opened his mouth, then closed it, seemed to reconsider something. "How did it go?" Callie almost laughed. "Honestly, I think it went the way most things go." She zipped her bag. "Have a good afternoon." She made it to the revolving door before she heard him behind her. "Miss?" She turned. He was still standing where she'd left him, not following her. Just standing there with the posture of someone who was accustomed to not needing to raise his voice. "The photograph," he said. "The woman in it. Is she your mother?" Callie's hand went still on the door. She walked back to him slowly. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "She looks like someone I used to know. A lot of people look like other people." "Yes," he said, "but not like this." His name was Reed Calloway. She found that out in the worst possible way. From the bronze plaque on the wall of the executive floor, which she saw 30 minutes later when he asked if she had a few minutes to talk and led her to an elevator she hadn't known existed. One that required a keycard. One that opened directly into an office the size of her entire apartment. Reed Calloway, President and CEO, the Alderton Group. She hadn't recognized him because she'd stopped following hospitality industry news around the same time her mother got the diagnosis. Otherwise, she would have known. Everyone in hotel management knew the name. She stood in the middle of his office and wondered if she was being pranked. "Sit down, please," he said. "I'm fine standing." "All right." He didn't push it. He moved to the window instead, floor to ceiling, the whole city below, and kept his back to her for a moment. When he turned around, he looked like a man who had been rehearsing something and had just decided to throw out the script. "The woman in the photograph." Dark hair, about 60, a scar on her left hand, small scar, near the thumb. Callie's throat closed. Her name, he said quietly, was Ellen. Was, Callie said. She passed away 7 months ago. The room was very quiet. Reed Calloway turned back to the window. She saw the line of his shoulders change. Something went out of them, not all at once, but slowly like air leaving. I'm sorry, he said, and it didn't sound like the automatic kind. Callie sat down because her legs decided for her. How did you know her? He was quiet for a long time. She was my mother too, he said. Here is what Callie Sutton knew about her family. Her mother, Ellen, had grown up in Toledo, Ohio. She'd left at 19 with $60 and a bus ticket. She'd never talked about why. She'd never talked about family. When Callie was 8, she asked if she had grandparents, aunts, cousins, and her mother said some things belonged to the past, sweetheart. And the way she said it made Callie know not to ask again. Here is what Callie Sutton did not know, that Ellen had a brother, that the brother's name was Gerald Calloway, not the pen-clicking HR director, a different Gerald, long dead now, that Ellen had left Toledo because of something that happened in that family, something that had fractured everyone in it along different fault lines, that Gerald had a son, that the son had grown up to build one of the largest hotel groups in the Midwest without ever knowing his mother's sister existed. Reed had a file. It took Callie a moment to understand what she was looking at when he set it on the coffee table between them. Not a corporate file, a personal one. Old documents. A Toledo address. A photograph of 2 children, maybe 6 and 9, squinting into summer sun. My father's records, Reed said. He started looking for her about 15 years ago. Hired someone. They traced her to Chicago, but then the trail went cold. He paused. She'd changed her last name. Callie looked at her mother's face at age 9, the gap-toothed smile. She never said anything, she said. Not once. I know. He sat across from her. He had the kind of stillness that meant he'd learned how to hold things inside and had been doing it for a long time. When I saw the photograph today, it's the same gap between her front teeth. It looked exactly like. He stopped. I thought I was imagining it. Callie looked down at her wallet. She thought about the 18 months she'd spent in her mother's apartment, sorting medications, keeping the air humidifier running, sleeping on the couch so she'd hear if something happened in the night. She thought about all the things she'd asked in those months, gently, trying to fill in the outline of a woman she thought she knew. She thought about how her mother had smiled and said, "There's nothing interesting back there, Cal," and she had believed her. I want to know, Callie said. Whatever you know, I want to hear it. So Reed told her. He was not an easy talker, that was clear. He chose words carefully, paused often, seemed uncomfortable with the parts that required him to say how he felt. But he was thorough. He had a good memory, and he'd had 15 years of thinking about this family history in the abstract, which meant he could lay it out clearly now that it was suddenly real. The Calloway family had owned a hardware business. Gerald Sr. and his wife had 2 children, Gerald Jr., Reed's father, and Ellen, younger by 3 years. There was a falling out when Ellen was 18-19, something about money, something about a decision Ellen had made that the rest of the family couldn't accept. She left. Gerald Jr. tried to reach her twice over the years, letters to old addresses. Nothing came back. He died at 67. He'd asked Reed to keep looking. He felt guilty, Reed said. He didn't say it in those words. My father never said things in those words, but I knew. Callie thought of her own mother. The way she'd sometimes go quiet in the middle of ordinary things, washing dishes, folding laundry, and stare at nothing for a few seconds before coming back. She did too, Callie said, I think. They sat for a while without talking. Downstairs, somewhere below them, the Alderton Grand was doing what hotels do, feeding people, cleaning rooms, turning down beds with a single folded mint on the pillow. Outside, Chicago was getting dark. What position were you interviewing for? Reed asked eventually. Event operations coordinator. 4th floor, the HR guy with the pen. Reed almost smiled. Gerald, he said. He clicks it when he's stressed. He was very stressed, apparently. A pause. Then from him, I'll pull the file. Don't. He looked at her. I don't want that, she said. I mean it. If I get a job here or anywhere, I want to get it because I'm qualified. She held his gaze. I am qualified. I have 8 years of event coordination experience. I ran a full conference program for a 200-room property in Indianapolis before I came back to Chicago, and the gap in my employment was because I chose to take care of my mother. I'm not ashamed of any of it. He was looking at her the way people sometimes did when they weren't expecting someone to say exactly what they meant. I know, he said. I can tell. Her daughter's name was Rosie. She was 7, and she had her grandmother's gap-toothed smile and the uncanny ability to assess any social situation within approximately 4 seconds of entering it. She assessed Reed Calloway in about 2. The three of them were in a park the following Sunday. Neutral ground, Callie's idea, somewhere with other people and open exits, and the general social pressure of public space to keep everyone behaving. Reed had brought coffee for the adults, and after a phone call in which he'd asked Callie what kind of juice boxes, Rosie liked and written down the answer with the focused attention of someone taking notes in a board meeting. A juice box with a green straw. Rosie accepted it gravely. She looked at Reed. She looked at the juice box. She looked at Callie. "Is this the man from the hotel?" she asked. "Yes," Callie said. "Mom said you bumped into her," Rosie said to Reed, "and that it was both your faults equally." Reed glanced at Callie. "That sounds right." Rosie took a long pull from the straw, considered this. "Grandma has a picture of her when she was a little girl," she told him. "Mom has it in her wallet because she misses her." "I know," Reed said. "I got to see it. Did you know my grandma?" "No," he said, "but I wish I had." Rosie seemed to find this acceptable. She handed him the juice box. It had a drip on the bottom, and she wiped it on his knee without thinking about it, the way children do, and went to look at the ducks. Reed looked at the damp spot on his suit and then at Callie, and something in his expression broke open for just a moment. Something almost like grief, but softer, like missing something you'd never had the chance to lose properly. "She looks like her," he said. "I know." Callie watched Rosie argue with a mallard about territorial rights. "I see it every day." 3 weeks later, Gerald the pen clicker called Callie with a job offer. She almost said no, just to see if she could. She said yes, because she needed the work and the offer was good and she was, in fact, qualified, and because she'd made Reed promise twice, in writing, once in a text so she had a record, that he had not intervened, he hadn't. She had Gerald's slightly pained email confirmation to prove it. She started on a Monday. The Alderton Grand was different from the inside. Still intimidating, still the chandelier, still the marble. But now she knew where the staff elevators were and which coffee machine on the 3rd floor made the better espresso, and that the concierge named Darnell had a memory like a steel trap and would be her most valuable resource. She learned fast, she always had. Reed was not her boss. She reported to the events director, a woman named Sandra Chen, who had been running the department for 11 years and had seen enough new hires to know within a week whether they were worth the investment of her time. Callie passed that assessment on Wednesday of the first week. She saw Reed in the building the way you see anyone at a large company, occasionally in corridors in the lobby. He was always moving, always attended by at least one person with a tablet. He didn't treat her differently than anyone else, which she appreciated, and she didn't treat him differently than anyone else, which he seemed to appreciate. But sometimes she'd find a coffee on her desk with no note. Or she'd be in the middle of a hard afternoon and get a text that said just, "Rosie still winning the duck argument?" And she'd laugh without meaning to, alone in her office, and it would be enough. What she didn't know was this: Reed had found a box. His father had kept it under the bed in the Toledo house, which Reed had inherited and never sold, and which his property manager had described as the house that's still full of Mr. Calloway's things, sir, if you ever want to do something about that. Reed had driven to Toledo on a Saturday in October with a truck and 3 hours blocked in his calendar, and he'd found the box under the bed. It had Ellen's name on it. Inside, 2 birthday cards from Gerald Jr., the kind you mail and never know if they arrive. A class photograph, 1st grade. A drawing of a house with a yellow door that could have been made by either of them. A letter, 6 pages, handwritten, dated about 20 years ago, that Gerald Jr. had written but never sent, in which he said everything he hadn't said when she left and probably should have said much sooner. Reed drove back to Chicago in the dark with the box on the passenger seat. He called Callie from the parking garage. She heard something in his voice. Not distress exactly. Just the sound of someone holding more than they expected to carry. "Can I show you something?" he asked. She met him in the lobby of his building at 9 at night, still in her work clothes from a long Friday, and he handed her the box without saying much, and she sat on his couch under a lamp and read her mother's birthday cards, and the letter that was never sent, while Reed made coffee in the kitchen and stayed there, out of her way, because he somehow knew that's what she needed. She read the letter 3 times. When she came to find him, her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. He loved her, she said. I know, he was sorry about what happened. Yes. She set the letter carefully on the counter. She would have wanted to know that, even at the end, maybe especially at the end. She pressed her fingers to the page. It would have helped her. Reed was quiet. "I'm glad I know," she said. "I'm glad you found it." I almost didn't open the box. I stood there for 10 minutes trying to decide if it was mine to open. Callie looked at him. It's yours too, all of it." She said it simply, like a fact. "Your family." Something moved through his expression then, careful, unhurried, like a tide coming in. He nodded once. It looked like it cost him something, and also like he was relieved to pay it. The story made the Chicago Tribune in December. Not the version Callie would have chosen. She would have chosen no version. But a business reporter picked up that Reed Calloway had quietly established a scholarship fund at DePaul University in the name of Ellen Sutton, and someone connected the dots, and the story ran on page B3 under the headline, "Hotel CEO honors aunt he never met." It was accurate and not unkind, and she read it twice on her phone in the break room and then put her phone away. Sandra came by her office at 4 o'clock. "You doing okay?" Callie said. "It's weird to see someone else's version of your own life. It usually is." Sandra set a bakery bag on her desk. "Blueberry muffin. Don't thank me, I had a coupon." She thanked her anyway. She called Reed that evening after Rosie was in bed. "I got ambushed," he said before she could say anything. "I want you to know I did not talk to that reporter. I know. Your publicist talked to that reporter." A pause. "I've spoken to her about that." Callie laughed a little. "The scholarship is beautiful, Reed. You didn't have to do that. She should have had something with her name on it." He said it plainly, like it was just a simple truth. She existed, she mattered, there should be something. Callie was quiet for a moment. "My dad left when I was 4, she said. "I've never told you that. My mother raised me alone, and I watched her work herself half to death for every good thing we had, and she never complained. She never asked anyone for anything. She was the toughest person I've ever known." She paused, and she was lonely. In this way she never talked about. This old, specific loneliness that I think came from losing her family when she was 18, and spending 40 years pretending that the whole wasn't there. "Yes," Reed said softly. "I used to think there was nothing I could do about that. About the part of her that was before me." Callie looked at the dark window. "I was wrong. She knew she was loved," he said. "Whatever else she felt. You were there. You were there every day." "So were you," she said, surprising herself. "In the way that you were always out there. And she passed that down to me somehow. The searching. Rosie has it too. You've seen her with those ducks. She's going to wear them down eventually. She comes from people who don't give up on things." She heard him exhale. Something released, something set down. "Thanksgiving," he said. "I know it's late notice and you may already have plans. But I have a house that is too large and a refrigerator full of things that require a real occasion to justify. Rosie's welcome. I have a yard. There are apparently some migratory ducks that stop in the pond back there." Callie smiled at the window. "Is that a real selling point, or did you put that there specifically?" "I may have checked the migratory patterns. You absolutely did. I'm not confirming that." She laughed then quietly. "Yes, we'll come." They came. Rosie wore her best dress, the one with small yellow flowers on it that she picked out herself at Target and had worn to 4 separate events since because she maintained it was the perfect dress for any situation, and Callie had stopped arguing. She walked into Reed's house and immediately identified the yard through the back window and informed Reed that she would need to see the pond before dinner. Reed led her out personally, while Callie started in on the turkey, which was technically already cooked but needed to be reorganized in a way that Reed, despite all evidence of general competence, seemed to find very confusing. She stood in his kitchen in the afternoon light and listened to her daughter talk to a man she'd known for a few months about ducks and migration, and whether ducks remembered places they'd been before, and whether they felt happy to come back, and whether they sometimes surprised themselves by how glad they were to arrive somewhere they didn't know they'd been looking for. Reed said he thought they probably did, that some things worked that way. You didn't always know you were looking until you found it, and then the recognition was so complete that it felt like you'd been heading toward it your whole life. He was talking about ducks, and he wasn't. Callie turned back to the turkey. The light through the window was late and warm, that particular November gold. Somewhere in Toledo, in a box now sitting on a shelf in her apartment, there were birthday cards that never arrived, and a letter that took 20 years to be read, and a photograph of 2 children squinting into a summer they couldn't have known would end the way it did. But they were here now, all of them, in the ways they could be. She pressed her hands flat against the counter and took a breath and felt, for the first time in a long time, that she was standing in exactly the right place.